another sort of turbulent day here. The volatility has really picked up. We're down another more than 3.5% for the week, almost 10% from the recent highs. I know that you guys have brushed this off, but I do wonder if you're starting to get concerned now that these losses are picking up. 62% of Americans own stocks. I mean, it's near 20-year high. So how can the White House not be concerned about hardworking Americans' 401k plans?
Look, Sarah, I didn't say we're not concerned.
I want to tell you there's tremendous optimism out there about our country in terms of regulations being cut, in terms of taxes being cut.
Isn't it great to have an optimistic president who has a real plan to make life better for Wall Street and Main Street?
Well, I mean, that would absolutely be great if it were true. But the markets have been absolutely roiling over Donald Trump's incoherent trade policies, tariff policies. He'll threaten certain tariffs and then renege on the tariffs that he's threatening various countries, including our allies with. And so that has certainly been reflected in how the markets are performing, how the stock market is performing. And look, you guys know me, I don't really care as much about stock market performance. I don't think that that's the best metric to determine whether or not our economy is doing well. But it is one metric, it is one indicator of how things are going under the leadership of Donald Trump. And the instability, the uncertainty really does stem from the fact that we don't really know in any given month what the president of the United States is going to decide in regard to these tariffs. Now, Trump's threat toward the European Union was really fascinating because that was the latest threat that he put out. He is now threatening the EU with 200% tariffs on champagne and other alcoholic imports coming from the EU. So Europe has decided to, of course, retaliate against Trump's previous tariffs against EU countries. These are tariffs on steel and aluminum, which I'm always tempted to say as aluminium because I just love the way the British pronounce it. But nonetheless, let's talk a little bit about Europe's retaliatory tariffs, which then led to Trump threatening to impose a 200% tariff on things like champagne coming in from Europe. So first, with tariffs as high as 50% on US products, including Harley-Davidson motorcycles and Kentucky bourbon, which will take effect, by the way, on April 1st. The second wave of tariffs coming from the EU in regard to US goods coming into European countries is a series of measures in mid-April that would target farm products and industrial goods that are important specifically to Republican districts. So what the EU is doing here is really interesting because they are intentionally attempting to apply as much pain as possible to certain states or to certain areas of the country that manufacture products or have goods that they export to European countries, because Republican voters are going to feel the pain, considering what they're choosing to target for tariffs. And so they think, well, if these voters feel pain, it's likely that they'll apply pressure on Donald Trump to essentially lift some of the tariffs that he's implemented on European goods that are coming into the United States. Now, European leaders say that they would absolutely like to avoid tariffs overall. They want to sit down with Donald Trump. They want to make a deal. But in response to the retaliatory tariffs coming from Europe, we get another threat from Trump. So he announced this on Truth Social. Let me read what he wrote. He says, the European Union, one of the most hostile and abusive taxing and tariffing authorities in the world, which was formed for the sole purpose of taking advantage of the United States, has just put a nasty 50% tariff on whiskey. I love whiskey, so I would also find that very nasty if I had to pay more for it. But nonetheless, let me continue with the statement. He says, if this tariff is not removed immediately, the US will shortly place a 200% tariff on all wines, champagnes, and alcoholic products coming out of France and other EU represented countries. This will be great for the wine and champagne business in the United States. I should note, it's like a very elitist thing to say, but it is true. Champagne is called champagne because it comes from a certain part of France called Champagne. So you call, other champagne-like products that weren't made in Champagne other names, but you guys get the picture. So Also, this is why the EU decided to target politically sensitive product categories to inflict enough pain on Trump voters in particular, because again, they feel that Trump voters have some sway over the decision making of the Trump administration. And look, despite Trump's most recent 200% tariff threats, the EU wants to avoid caving to Trump. They were hoping that their retaliatory tariffs against the United States or products being imported from the United States would convince Trump to come back to the table and negotiate for a better trade deal. But obviously, his first course of action was to retaliate further with another threat. Now, France's trade minister said on X, "We will not give in to threats. Trump is escalating the trade war he chose to unleash." And Trump supporter Bernard Arnault is actually one of the richest people in the world, number one, but he is the man behind a lot of the products that will be impacted by Trump's tariffs if he does in fact go through with them. And so what's interesting is this guy is a huge Trump supporter. He went to Trump's inauguration. We haven't heard a peep from him, but I should note that champagne technically is produced only in a specific region in France. About 16% of its total exports go to the United States based on industry data from 2023, making America the largest importer of the sparkling wine. Please, it's champagne. It's not sparkling wine. You can't do that. Now, let's get back to the stock market because that's what CNBC has its hair on fire over. And it's actually really entertaining to watch it. I gotta be honest with you on that. So despite how much these tariff tiffs are negatively impacting the stock market, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says, don't worry about it. Everything's great.
I was with the Business Roundtable yesterday. I think it was 135 CEOs, and I talked to them about our plan, which includes tariffs, deregulation, and what I call reprivatizing the government and bringing down this incredible level of government spending. And one or two items with one trading block, I'm not sure why that's a big deal for the markets.
I mean, it's not just about one trade. First of all, the trading block that we're talking about is the European Union. It's not a small thing. And it's not just about a few products, right? So Trump really wants to implement these retaliatory tariffs, but he also wants to keep the tariffs on steel and aluminum for national security purposes. I think that there's actually a decent case to make about the steel and aluminum tariffs, but for Scott Bessent to pretend as though we're just talking about one or two products, we're just talking about like one or two countries we're engaging with in this antagonistic way, that's just not the case. This is obviously something that's impacting our relationships with our allies. It remains to be seen what Trump is actually going to carry out, what he's being serious about, or whether or not he's implementing some of these tariffs as a bargaining chip to negotiate better trade deals. We don't know. And the markets are always going to react poorly to uncertainty in the economy. And that's certainly what we have right now. And, of course, Trump goes back and forth on these tariffs. There's just a lot that is unknown. And so it's difficult for companies to know whether they want to invest in expanding their companies, whether they want to spend any money on innovation when they don't really know what's going to happen next month. And that's really what's being reflected right now in the stock market. So as this story develops, obviously we will give you more and tell you what will happen with these alleged 200% tariffs. But for now, it just seems like Trump doesn't have a real plan or strategy in place, but he could prove us wrong. I doubt it, but he could. So we'll wait and see.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows. Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.